Forgotten in the jewel box, the jewels of Queen Elizabeth never seen enough. There's something haunting about a jewel that sparkles just once before disappearing into darkness. Queen Elizabeth II possessed hundreds of treasures, some worn constantly until they became part of her identity, others that emerged for a single evening before vanishing for decades. We all know the famous pieces, the Vladimir Tiara, the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland Tiara, those diamond chandelier earrings that caught the light at countless state banquets. But today, we're stepping into the quieter corners of the royal vaults, where extraordinary pieces wait in shadow, some forgotten, others perhaps too precious, too meaningful, or simply too grand for regular display. These are the jewels that tell different stories, stories of brief brilliance, of promises unfulfilled, of treasures that were meant to shine but somehow never found their moment. Before we begin this journey together into these forgotten corners, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means everything. Thank you. The Australian opal flowering gum brooch. Let's begin with something profound that spent most of its existence hidden. Imagine Princess Elizabeth in 1947, a young bride receiving wedding gifts from across the Commonwealth. Among the silver services and traditional presents came something special from the returned sailors and Soldiers' Imperial League of Australia, a delicate golden spray resembling a eucalyptus branch, adorned with black opals. This wasn't merely decorative. It represented gratitude from Commonwealth veterans who had served in the war that had just ended, a tribute woven with wedding joy and wartime remembrance, crafted from Australia's national gemstone. The design captured the distinctive flowering gum, that symbol of home for so many Australian soldiers who had fought far from their shores. You would expect such a meaningful wedding treasure, carrying such emotional weight and Commonwealth significance, to become a constant companion, wouldn't you? Something worn regularly to honour that gift and those who gave it. But here's the strange reality. Despite its deep significance and unique beauty, this Australian opal branch proved remarkably elusive. Throughout 7 decades of reign, it appeared so infrequently that jewellery historians struggle to document even a handful of public outings. The brooch that symbolised so much seemed to prefer the darkness of the jewellery box to any public appearance. Perhaps some gifts, no matter how cherished privately, simply don't translate from sentiment to style. Or perhaps, in a collection of hundreds of brooches, even the most meaningful pieces can become lost in the abundance. The Czech Bohemian Garnet Suite. From one rare Australian treasure to European garnets that became even more invisible. In 1996, Queen Elizabeth received an exquisite gift from Brno, Czech Republic, a complete suite featuring deep red Bohemian garnets in 18-karat gold. The timing of this visit was significant. The Queen was the first British monarch to visit the Czech Republic, and her presence carried deep historical meaning. During her state banquet speech, she acknowledged the painful shadow in British-Czech relations, the 1938 Munich Agreement, when Britain and France had failed to protect Czechoslovakia from Hitler's demands. The set from Brno was comprehensive: necklace, bracelet, brooch, and earrings, meticulously crafted by artisan Jizzy Urban in just 30 days. He drew inspiration from classical 19th century jewellery, even referencing a garnet suite the great German writer Goethe once gave to Ulrike von Lewizow as a token of his love. Here's a telling detail about the Queen's genuine appreciation. When departing Brno, the Queen cradled the jewellery case in her own lap throughout the journey. Protocol would normally dictate staff handle such gifts, a small but revealing gesture of personal connection. Yet for all that visible appreciation, for all that historical significance, the Czech garnets became ghosts. The complete suite never once appeared in public, not at a single state banquet, not at any diplomatic gala. The only piece that saw daylight was the brooch, and even that had precisely one moment. New Year's Day 2006 worn to church at Sandringham. One brooch, one Sunday morning, then silence for the rest of her life. Queen Mary's fringe tiara. Sometimes the most famous pieces have the strangest stories. Queen Mary's fringe tiara is etched into our collective memory from those luminous photographs of Princess Elizabeth's wedding day in 1947. For many of us, this is the wedding tiara, the one that defines royal bridal tradition. It became tradition itself, loaned to Princess Anne in 1973, to Princess Beatrice in 2020, a beautiful something borrowed that threads through generations, which makes what happened next so extraordinary. After that famous wedding day, the tiara disappeared from the Queen's head for years, then decades. It became the tiara we associated with her as a bride, but never saw again on her as Queen. Here's the fascinating twist in this tale. The young bride had only borrowed it from her mother for that special day. It remained the Queen Mother's personal property, not yet the Queen's own to keep. The tiara that had graced her wedding wasn't actually hers. She didn't formally inherit this tiara until 2002 after her mother's passing, 55 years after she first wore it down the aisle of Westminster Abbey. It came to her not as a wedding gift, but as part of her mother's legacy, carrying memories of two women now. And even then, silence. The years continued to pass, until finally, November 2009, during a state visit to Trinidad and Tobago, there it was, the Queen wearing her wedding tiara once more. 62 years between wearings, the gap is simply breathtaking. Imagine the memories that must have stirred when she selected it that evening, seeing perhaps an echo of that young bride from so long ago and remembering her mother who had lent it with such love. The Plunkett Tiara. If patience defines some stories, pure drama defines others. London, January 1973. The Fanfare for Europe Gala at the Royal Opera House, celebrating Britain's entry into the European Economic Community. The Queen and Duke are en route from Windsor. For this important international evening, she had chosen the legendary Vladimir tiara. Then catastrophe struck. Somewhere during that journey, the frame snapped. It broke. They were minutes from the Opera House, with no time to return to Windsor or reach Buckingham Palace. The Queen was about to arrive at a major gala with a broken tiara. Enter Lord Plunkett, her trusted equerry, who lived steps from the Royal Opera House. In brilliant quick thinking, he rushed home, opened his safe, and retrieved his own family's tiara. The Queen's car stopped. The Plunkett tiara was handed over, and Her Majesty placed it on her head right there. This is verified truth, confirmed in letters by the Plunkett family. For one night only, the Queen wore a tiara belonging not to the crown but to her resourceful courtiers' family. Grace under pressure at its finest. Queen Mary's diamond stomacher. Some pieces disappear because they're too spectacularly dramatic. Queen Mary's diamond stomacher tells this story perfectly. Created for Queen Mary in 1920, this wasn't merely large, it was architectural. She used diamonds from two wedding presents, a stomacher from the Maharaja of Kapurthala and a crescent from Swansea, both from 1893. She transformed her past into something spectacular. Composed of 3 graduated brooches cascading with pear-shaped and brilliant diamonds, it covered the entire bodice. The irony, by 1920 stomachers were already out of fashion. Queen Mary created essentially a museum piece from day one. She wore it publicly just once, at a 1922 state banquet for Belgian royalty. After that single grand outing, it retreated to the vaults. When Queen Mary gave it to Princess Elizabeth in 1947, the young bride was overwhelmed. Her solution: wear just the bottom portion. She continued this through the early 1950s. The full stomacher, all 3 brooches together as intended. That waited until 2002, 55 years later. For her Golden Jubilee dinner at Windsor Castle, the Queen finally wore the complete piece. Sometimes the most spectacular pieces need the most spectacular occasions. The Jordanian turquoise suite. In 1966, King Hussein of Jordan presented Queen Elizabeth II with something distinctive, a turquoise and sapphire suite described as a cluster and drop necklace, and matching earrings of turquoises with diamonds and sapphires. This appears to be the only major turquoise set in her vast collection. The pieces featured intricate cluster work, combining sky blue turquoise with deep sapphires and sparkling diamonds. The Queen first wore this gift 18 years later in March 1984, during a state visit to Jordan. She debuted it at a state banquet in Amman, a fitting tribute to her host. Nearly a decade passed before its second appearance at the Berlin Tattoo in October 1992. 1 month later came the third and final documented moment, November 1992, at a concert at the Barbican in London. 3 appearances over 8 years, then silence for the remaining 30 years of her reign. The Andamooka Opal Necklace. Let me tell you about a jewel whose entire public life can be captured in 2 evenings. The Andamooka Opal Necklace carries one of the most dramatic stories. March 23, 1954. The Queen was deep into her 6-month Commonwealth tour when South Australia presented her with something extraordinary at a state banquet in Adelaide. Premier Playford's words revealed the magnitude. So far as we know, the Andamooka Opal is the finest and largest opal of its kind in Australia. The centrepiece was breathtaking, a 203-carat white opal holding green fire within. That spectacular stone had been discovered in 1949, when a miner's pick turned over rough stone at 30 feet deep. The original piece measured 4 inches by 2 inches. The finished necklace was entirely Australian-made, crafted in Adelaide, set with 180 diamonds in 18-carat palladium. Contemporary reports noted the Queen appeared genuinely delighted. The following evening, March 24th, she wore her new treasure to the Royal Music Festival at Wayville Oval, paired with Queen Mary's Lover's Knot tiara. And then, nothing. That musical evening was the first and last time the Andamooka Opal appeared in public. Despite its spectacular beauty and that massive 203-carat stone, it simply vanished. The necklace has appeared at exhibitions at Buckingham Palace, allowing glimpses of its fire. But as a living piece of royal jewellery worn and enjoyed, its story ended after just 2 evenings. Perhaps those 2 evenings in Adelaide were exactly the right length of story for this treasure. The Indian Circlet. There's one more we must discuss, carrying a love story at its heart. The Indian Circlet was designed by Prince Albert for his beloved Queen Victoria, originally set with opals. After Victoria, Queen Alexandra replaced the opals with Burmese rubies, believing opals brought bad luck. Intriguingly, neither she nor Queen Mary were ever photographed wearing it. The tiara languished until 1937, when Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, made it her signature piece. She wore it for 50 years. It became profoundly hers. The Indian Circlet was an heirloom of the crown, but Queen Elizabeth II graciously allowed her mother to keep it for life. In 2002, after the Queen Mother's death, it finally became the Queen's. Would she wear this historic masterpiece so linked to her mother's memory? In November 2005, during a state visit to Malta, she did. For one glittering state banquet, the Queen appeared in the Indian Circlet. That one magnificent appearance was the only time she ever wore it. Perhaps it was too profoundly her mother's tiara. Whatever the reason, it remains one of the most remarkable one-time wonders in her reign. Each of these pieces tells a story frozen in stones and metal. Some sparkled once before disappearing. Others waited decades for their moment. What strikes me is that even in our age of documentation, royal treasures guard their secrets. These jewels can still surprise us. Tell us honestly, which would you most want to see on Queen Camilla or Princess Catherine in the near future? What do you feel when some forgotten treasure suddenly surfaces? The same excitement we do? That's what makes royal jewels magical. They can still astonish us. And somewhere in those velvet cases, treasures we've never seen wait for their moment.